Hi guys, and welcome to this little basically talk which revolves around the tantalum oxygen and the IEMs which have better or worse tried to emulate it and give us the same sort of sound, the same sort of performance at a significantly lower price. Obviously, we all know that the tantalum oxygen has this kind of Harman style of tune. But I'm focusing here more on the ones which actually use basically the same driver or slight different variations of that driver. Okay, for those that maybe have doubts of what I say sometimes when I say that I've got 3 oxygens, here they are, 3 oxygens. 1, 2, 3 oxygens. This is an original, this is like an intermediate one, and this is the latest one. Okay, 3 different oxygens. Olina SE, 2 Olinas. Blondes, I've got a whole bunch of them, but these are my 2 modified blondes, what I call the Bloxygen. My original Bloxygen mod and my latest Bloxygen mod. Sick-Reel Airship, SimGot EA500, okay, although it doesn't use the same driver, mind you. And then these 3 here are 3 drivers or 3 earphones made by myself, which use a shell, which you can see is basically the same as the Olina's shell. Okay, it's just the faceplate is different. All right. If there is any doubts, actually, let me bring this up here. That's an Olina. This is what I have here. Okay, this shell actually belongs to an IEM called, as you can see there, the UHE. Okay, and this IEM, the original, IEM, I just used the shell. I canned the driver inside. Is the factory that actually made the Olinas. Simple, okay? So I've got the same, it's the same factory. Anyway, let's leave it at that. So these are 3 that I actually made myself. All right. Now, in the graphs, which I'll show to you in a couple of minutes, you'll understand better certain things that I will be saying here now. But in essence, yes, okay, for the sake of not complicating things, the oxygen, the Olinas, and the blonde, and the airship, they all use basically the same driver. End of story. Okay? The difference here is, of course, the shells, and then those shells introduce their different nuances accompanied to the different tunings that each one of them has. Now, obviously, the blonde in its stock format is completely different, so it will be very easy to distinguish it. Modified like it is here, I can confidently say that many will not be able to tell the difference between these, especially the latest version, the oxygen and the Olinas. Many will not be able to tell the difference. I can even go further than that and say that I actually made one of these mods and sent it out to a friend of mine in South Africa, and he was totally blown away. And he owns the EA500, for example, the SimGot. And he was saying that he couldn't believe how good this was. Why? Because he naturally associated $25 with a cheap IEM. But no, the driver that's in here is basically the same driver as in the oxygen. So, yes, we can say that the Olinas, they were something which was done that was giving us the performance and bringing us the performance basically of an oxygen at a fraction of the price. I mean, they were like $79, if I'm not mistaken, the original, the Olina, versus $280 of the oxygen. Yes, that's no issues there. Now, does that mean automatically that's going to be sounding the same? No, and call it bias. Say that it's me, that I'm biased towards the oxygen. I like the oxygen. Well, I mean, the brand doesn't give me anything, doesn't pay me anything. My bias is the same bias as many others have towards other earphones and other brands. I mean, an IVipQ has got these die-hard fans for it that will, crucify anybody that says anything bad about it. And nevertheless, when I reviewed it and I compared it against the Neon Pro, the reality was the Neon Pro from our audio was giving very much the same performance, if not maybe even better to my ears, as the IVipQ. Anyway, back to this, which is what matters. The original compared to the latest. And guys, obviously I don't have a set of 07s for every one of them, so I interchanged when I did the measurements and put the 07 in the tips that are on the earphones that I was measuring. But basically I used 07s in all the measurements. Okay, I always use the 07s for the sake of being equal, of trying to maintain a certain uniformity in the measurements. Original compared to the latest one, less bass, and for some reason which I cannot explain, upper mids into the treble and the extension it's just graphs different. Does it sound radically different? No, it doesn't. To be honest, it doesn't. But it graphs different. Go figure. I don't know why. Original Olina is this one here, the first one that I got. It had those peaks that we know and so on and so forth. Then modified with the dual damper. Modified with the dual damper, it basically becomes, or rather, the Olina SE is basically this. It's basically this. Can you pick up on certain differences? I guess you can if you really are really attentive and your ears are really special. I guess you can maybe pick up on a few differences here and there. But these differences ultimately, and this is one thing that I want to say is very personal and subjective to everybody, are going to be differences when they are so close like they are going to be differences in terms of timbre and tonality and how the cleanliness of the highs is done, and maybe the way that the bass comes across. Okay, it's not going to be day and night differences. So for those that cannot afford to buy an oxygen, is buying an Olina a good option? Probably yes, definitely. But if you're going to buy an Olina, then also look at the SIMGOT at the A500, because the A500 for me is every bit as competent and even better. This does a better job, in my opinion, of simulating and even exceeding the performance of an oxygen. But that's just me in my ears, that's just me. Again, let me just rewind a little bit there. In stock format and modified as well. Stock and modified. All right. Now, the Olina SE, this unit that I have here, and all that I'm saying is based on the units that I have in front of me. This unit here is more similar in terms of its bass performance to the original oxygen. Although the original oxygen, for some reason, it just sounds a little bit extra warmer. This sounds a little bit colder. And interestingly, the SICK reel, the airship, also graphs very similar to the original oxygen, but for some reason which I can't explain as well, it's the one that actually sounds the coldest between this, and this. Is it the shell? I don't know what it is. I don't know. Is it the driver? I just don't know. What I do know is what I hear. Okay. The SIMGOT EA500. The bass is low and this and that. Well, I never really found the difference between it in terms of the bass and the oxygen. I never really did. And in the mids and highs, I even think that many times it's more competent than the oxygen. $70 versus $280. Compared to the original Olinas, it's a better IM. And I'm talking now stock. Once you modified it, the Olina does have something which is always had, and which is again something which it's difficult to understand why. It probably has to do with the shell and how the driver, which was supposedly one of the things that was done here on the SE, the driver angle and how it sits and the volume that's in front of the driver here is slightly different to that, and that's why this one sounds better. For some reason, this I don't know why, but it just sounds the treble just sounds clear. I can't explain it. Look, is it just my ears? Is it me? Is it the source I'm using? I'm not sure. I don't know. What I do know is I tried 2 different sources to do this comparison. I went through the tips. I remeasured to make sure that the measurements were the same. I used the same 2 songs always across the board. I tried and do as much as possible everything to keep things uniform. And this you know, the although they're similar, the sick reel just doesn't sound the same as the oxygen. The original or Olinas just don't sound the same in terms of the way that the upper mids and treble, it just doesn't sound the same. Not big differences, but it doesn't sound the same. Going back here to the Olina, this was the second Olina that I got, and this one, for example, had no bass. Compared to this one, it had no bass. I had to modify it to bring up the bass, and here's the mod. You see, it's got the filter there. I had to put that filter to just get the same bass as that one. So now imagine, here I am saying to you this and this and that and whatever, and then you go buy a set, and you get a set which is not exactly 100%, and it's not that, it doesn't correspond to your expectations, and then you're going to say that I was kind of you were misleading. No, this is an ungrateful job being a reviewer. Trust me, a very ungrateful job. And if those of you that are live in places of the earth, of this earth, that allow you to actually go and listen to the IEMs, you know what, do it. Listen to the IEMs. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Go listen to them and try them out. I've spent thousands of dollars in doing what I try and do, which is buy IEMs, buy multiples, compare, see how the QC is, so that whenever I speak and I try and convey my opinion, I convey it with a certain sense of security, that I know that most likely what I'm saying is what you're going to also encounter, okay, and that my marginal error is as reduced as possible. I know very few people that do that, but anyway, it's a different story. And then finally, just on the ones that I've made myself, this one here, for example, it graphs basically the same as the more recent oxygen. Very similar. Do they sound the same? No. The bass here, and this uses a Moondrop driver. Okay, it doesn't matter which driver, it uses a Moondrop driver. This just sounds more bassy. It just sounds different. You know, it's the way it is. It's just that. This one here is a more recent version I've done of that, and I went and fetched inspiration for this in the Soft Years Twilight. Is it going to be sounding like a Twilight? Well, I would like to say yes. I don't know, but it graphs the same as a Twilight, so you would assume that it would sound like the Twilight. I'm sure it doesn't sound like a Twilight, especially if there's a person that has the Twilight and is a big fan of the Twilight like I am of the Oxygen. I'm sure they will say, and they will hear the differences. Now, is this capable of sounding pretty decently and won't disappoint? Of that I'm pretty sure, because I mean I've given this IEM out to a few people to listen to it, and they were very impressed. They were very impressed. And again, it's using the same driver as that one's over there, the same Moondrop driver. Anyway, guys, I'll show you now the graphs. I hope the graphs as well help clarify a little bit more. And ultimately, you know, what I'm just trying to achieve with this video is not nothing more but to explain that yes, you can have things which are using the same driver, which are tuned in the same manner, but there will be differences in the sound. If not for any other reason, your ear anatomy will dictate those differences. You know, your actual unit that you get will dictate those differences. So it's always complicated. Even when I sometimes say, oh, you can get about 90% of the performance, or 85% of the performance, or whatever, it is always a statement which I say with a certain amount of you know, it's delicate. It's very delicate, because as I alluded just earlier, you know, being a reviewer, it's not easy, because obviously people will trust what I say, and they will go and spend their hard-earned cash basically on what I say and what other reviewers say as well. So, you know, I don't want to be now the one that makes you go spend money in a bad way. That's why for many years I actually stuck I kept my purchases to $100, and I would only basically buy cheap stuff. And you know what? The cheap stuff, some of it, and this is a perfect example of that, this is very good. This modified in this today, in 2023, this modified like I have here, this will keep up with the majority of the IEMs under $200. No problem. It will keep up with it. Will it beat them outright? No, but it will keep up with them. And you know what? You can pick this up for $25. Spend another $5 in modifying it, and that's it for $30. Didn't break the bank. $30, you got a fantastic IM. As long as it fits you properly, as long as the fit doesn't bug you, how wrong can you go? SimGot EA500, the SimGot EW200, are they also very good IEMs, for example? Yes, they are, of course. But you also have many others as well, which are equally as competent. The EPZ Q5, for example, is one of those IEMs. For some reason, the EPZ Q5 has been getting absolutely very little love. Only now I start seeing people actually picking up on it. But the Q5 is very much an EA500 with more bass. So you could say it's like a EW200. There's another very competitively, oh my God, sorry. There is another competent IEM that's tuned in a manner which is very similar to this, and that some of you will be able to tell the difference, of course, and others won't. Many of you probably won't. They will just listen to a Oxygen, listen to a Olina, listen to a Q5 from EPZ and say, oh, it's the same IEM. All right. Anyway, guys, show you now the graphs. Take care. Hi, guys, and welcome to this little, well, it's not really a review, it's a little talk about the Tenstrom Oxygen and the similar IEMs to the Tenstrom Oxygen, which are using the same driver or a variation of the same driver, and how they graph and how they sound and so on and so forth. Anyway, this has been a subject that ever since the launch of the Chapeau and Olina by HBB has generated a lot of controversy and a lot of talk. I've been, when I did now my mid-tier comparison, I then received some messages of people again touching up on that issue of the Olina SE and the Olina and the Oxygen, and if I could compare them, and also compare with the Airship, which is again another IEM which supposedly also uses the same driver. And by the way, the Blon 03 also uses a variation of the same driver, if you didn't know. So I decided to make a video. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is the driver, okay, of the Oxygen has suffered slight variations over its years. Okay, as I've mentioned a few times before, I have three Oxygens from three different series, from the first one to the more recent one. Although the basic design has maintained itself, there's been slight variations. The driver used in the Olina and the Olina SE is a driver which is the same as that driver, or which of the series exactly, I don't know, I'm not sure. I would say that it kind of is more similar to the Series 2 drivers, but that is only something that the factory can answer, or HBB himself can answer. The reality is this: they are using different shells, and although graphically they seem identical and they sound, I would say, almost identical, they, for me, and for my ears and for what I like listening to, I can pretty much tell them apart. I can confidently say that I can pretty much tell them apart, especially if I'm talking between Olina SE and then the Oxygen. With the Olina, once it's modified, it becomes a little bit difficult to tell it from the Oxygen. In its original format, where it does have certain amount of peakiness, 5K especially, you can also tell it apart from the Oxygen. Now, that's me. Maybe a lot of you will hear it if you had the opportunity to do that, and you wouldn't even tell the difference, or maybe the Olina would come out on top, or what. Ultimately, what is, I think, the most important thing, and irrespective of the fact that, okay, it's the same driver, is that there will always be differences depending on who is listening to the IM. 1, 2, I, for example, bought 2 Olinas, okay, and one of the Olinas, the second one that I bought, for example, had no bass comparatively to the first one. I had to retune it. I actually even had to add a damper, a Y4 damper to the front vent to actually bring the bass up to the level of the other Olina that I had. So, I can understand that, yes, okay, it's the same driver, but it's different shells, So that in itself already introduced slight variations, okay? And secondly, how the individual IEMs will fit specific people, specific ears. That will always, that is going to dictate differences, okay? I mean, the oxygen, for example, in my case, I've gone through using spin fits, to using KB Euro 7s, to using the LITZ type tips. I've had, BGVP wide bores, and ultimately the one that after trying those and many other tips that actually works the best is the KB Euro 7 for my ears. And for my ears, the KB Euro 7 tip on the oxygen, it graphs in the way that I'm going to be showing you now, and it sounds fantastic. I just like it. It's bias, fine, it's bias, it's whatever you want to call it. I like it. And for me, when I use the same KB Euro 7 tip on the Olina SE, for example, and I compare the two, the Olina doesn't sound as good. Is it a huge difference? No, it's not a huge difference. It's just a question of tonality. It's a question of, it just sounds slightly different to me. It sounds colder, the Olina. The oxygen sounds a little bit warmer. Even today on the Discord channel, a couple of friends were talking about the Isabellai and the Oriolis Isabellai and the oxygen. And it was actually curious because for me, my particular unit of the Isabellai, when I listen to it and I compare it to my oxygens, it sounds not as detailed in the treble. While some of the people that I was talking to about that were mentioning that for them, the Isabellai actually sounds more bright, sounds more intense in the treble. Go figure. and this is just a single driver, and as you can see, there's variances between what set that I get and a set that all you guys will get. There will be differences, okay, because there's something called QC, and if there's differences, and we're talking about a single DD, imagine now in a hybrid how many times that those differences can't happen. Anyway, the graph you see here is of one of my oxygens, okay? It's actually, let me put here okay. Mind you, I'm using KB Euro 07 tips. Okay, now, why does my KB Euro 07 Series 1, does my oxygen Series 1 with a KB Euro 7 tip, why does it graph this way? And then my latest oxygen with the KB Euro 7 tip graph the way that you see here? I don't know. All I know is, and I'll show you then all the IEMs in a second, I graphed them. I actually went to the trouble of graphing them now. This is how they graph. My Series 1, as you can see, yes, it's got less bass. It's more mid-focused. I can't explain it. It's what you see. It's as simple as that. My latest oxygen, like this. So there's definitely a difference here in the past 10K area. Difference there, 67, and definitely less bass. And it's the same tip on the same earphone, just different series. Okay, so that's the oxygen there, and this is the oxygen that most of the times I listen to because it's the one that has the nicest balance for me. Okay, the next one I'm showing you now, for example, is one of the Olinas, the normal Olinas that I have, modified. Okay, that's modified, and modified, it graphs exactly the same as that oxygen. Okay, nevertheless, it sounds slightly different. It's not me that I can tell it. I've actually given this earphone to three other people, and you can slightly tell the difference. And the Olinas just sound a little bit more open, but a little bit, and especially the 3D of the soundstage, that spaciousness, the Olina has got more of it. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I wish I knew, but I don't know. Okay, but it does, and nevertheless, you can see they are graphing exactly the same. Okay, this next one I'm going to show you is that one that I was mentioning to you earlier that had no bass. Okay, I had to add the Y4 dampers onto the front vents, and this is how it ended up graphing, which if you recall now the graphs that I was showing you just a second ago, look, it kind of really starts simulating more the original oxygen. All right, okay, go figure. Go figure. So let me just put again the oxygen. All right, this next one I'm going to show you now is the HOLA SE. The HOLA SE, compared to this latest oxygen that I have, it's got less base, and it's noticeable that it's got less base. Okay, when however I compare it to the original oxygen, it's very similar. Look at that. The base, the mids, everything very similar. It's just a slight little difference here and there. Nevertheless, however, they look almost identical, and I can still get a perception that the original oxygen just slightly has a different warmth on the base. Okay, look, this is so difficult because I wish I could actually show this live for you guys to actually hear and understand. I'm not trying to make a point here. What I'm just basically trying to say is that they can graph the same. They're not gonna sound the same because your ears are different than mine. Okay, so that's another. Now let me just put up here the SICK reel, the airship. Look how interesting that is as well. The airship, okay, again with the same 07 tip. All right, let me just remove the. Look how interesting it is that it actually does the same thing as the original oxygen does, but it's got more bass. And yes, you do notice that it's got more bass, but for some reason, the balance that is struck, with the sound that you perceive of the airship is a sound that the mids and the upper mids, and they sound just a little, it's not, this is not huge difference. They just sound a little bit more brighter, okay? Just a little bit more brighter than the original oxygen. Again, go figure, go understand why it is what it is. All right, next one now here. This is the original stock HOLA SE, okay? As you can see with those peaks that I mentioned, around close to 5K, which for some people it was being problematic. Compared to the, let me just change the color actually of the HOLA. Let me make it blue so it stands out a little, or black even, so it stands out. Okay, so that's the HOLA compared to the original oxygen. Base wise it seems the same and it sounds the same, but there's more energy in the HOLA. So the HOLA doesn't sound exactly 100% like an oxygen. Close, fair enough. And again, remember, using your 07 tip, and it's got that dip there, okay? Why does it do it? I have absolutely no idea. Now you take that HOLA, okay, this HOLA, and I modified it with a double damper mod, which was very popular, okay? Same exact IM. I just double damper. Changes completely. Look at that, okay? It now becomes similar to a more recent oxygen, the more recent oxygen that I have. You see, so it's a complicated question to answer because just minor changes completely alter the whole thing. They just completely alter the whole thing. Okay, let me just leave here the latest oxygen. Okay, and now let me put here, what is it, number 19 I believe. Yes, okay, this number 19, which I've just put up now, is an IM that I made myself. Okay, it uses a shell which is very similar to the HOLA shell, but it uses a moondrop driver. Okay, you would think that, okay, these are going to sound basically exactly the same, and you know what, when you listen to it, it sounds more bass. It's got more intensity in the bass. It does. It's not as the mids, upper mids and treble, they are clean as well, but it's got more intensity in the bass, and never, you can see it's graphing the same on the same amplitude as the oxygen, and it sounds different, and it's graphed exactly the same, and it's a moondrop driver. Okay, it's irrelevant which driver it is, it's a moondrop driver, right? Next one here that I'm going to show you now. This is actually, let me start the proper way, which would be this. Okay, this is the SIMGOT, the EA500 with the red filter on. Okay, very similar here on the mids, upper mids and treble to the oxygen. In my opinion, cleaner than the oxygen. Okay, and although you see this big difference here in the bass, and I can even put here the original oxygen, which they even are closer. Look, you see the original oxygen with the SIMGOT EA500. Okay, you listen to the original oxygen and you listen to the SIMGOT, and the SIMGOT has got more bass presence. It's got more bass presence, and you wouldn't think that. Okay, you listen to the latest oxygen and you compare it to the SIMGOT, and there isn't this difference in the bass. There isn't, definitely. They at the very best they sound the same to my ears, and nevertheless, I've heard countless times people saying, "Oh, the SIMGOT, the EA500 doesn't have too much bass. It's a little bit bass shy. This and this and that." Okay, fine. So what did SIMGOT do? SIMGOT went and they got us the EW200, which in essence, let me just remove the other. The SIMGOT EW200 is very similar to the EA500 with the red, just added bass. Okay, fine, great, fantastic. And I guess some of you will notice that difference. I didn't notice it. I still thought that the EA500 was better. Now, is the SIMGOT EW200 fantastic? Yes, it is. Amazing IM. And yes, if you actually even compare it to the oxygen, I mean, it holds its ground very nicely. It will probably sound exactly the same to many of you. You know, and even me, if I'm just listening to it casually, I probably wouldn't even be able to distinguish it. Okay? But if I start really now wanting to listen to it more carefully, I will be able to start telling slight differences. Because why? Because of the tonality. And this is a very subjective thing, because it's for me is one thing and for you guys will be a different thing. Okay? So what did I do to the EA500? I modified the EA500 slightly. Okay? And that's my modified EA500 in the green. And my modified EA500 is basically got the same bass as the EW, just lowered it ever so slightly here. So the balance that is struck is, in my opinion, perfect. And the modified EA500 is a beast. To my ears, it sounds absolutely surreal. For the $70 that it costs, and you then put a oxygen filter on that red nozzle. Okay, that's the one part of the mod, and then you add a little 350 2mm filter on the front vent, and this is what you will probably get if your one at least graphed the same as mine. And the thing and the difference, I hear the stock one and I hear this modified one, and you can tell the difference. You can trust me, you can tell the difference. Okay. Another example here that I want to show you is this is the Soft Ears Twilight. Okay, fantastic graph. I haven't had the pleasure of listening to it, but I will get there. But this served for me as an inspiration, and I played around, and there we go. I made this. Let me just change the color. And what is this? This is again that same shell as the Olina, with that same Moondrop driver that I was mentioning to you earlier. And I mean, that's not too shabby actually. That's, in my books, that's not too shabby at all. Graphically, it's almost identical to the Twilight. This is more than acceptable channel imbalance, in my books at least. Okay, does it sound the same? Probably not. And hell, it better not sound the same. Otherwise, how would you justify $900? Now, that I'm sure that it will not be a dramatic difference, that I'm sure as well. And just to again show you, what was the first or one of the versions that I made of that IEM that I created. Where is it here? No, my apologies. It's, I believe, this one here. No, this one, yeah. Okay, so the first version of this IM, which I've got both of them, was this one here. Okay, and now let me just align the new version, which is inspired by the Softtears Twilight. Okay, same driver, same shell. I don't know, maybe 12 hours of tuning and playing around, and I got this. You know, it sounds really good. It sounds really good. Okay, now, do I make claims? I'm not gonna make claims that it's a Softtears Twilight. Of course not. But I can confidently say that it will sound really good and will not disappoint even a person that does have a Twilight. Will that person that has the Twilight be able to tell the difference? Probably so, yes. Under the right conditions, I do believe that he will. Why? Because most likely they have a different tonality. And that's the whole thing that I was trying to say here about the oxygen, is it doesn't, the fact that they graph the same and that it's the same driver, the shell and how then that interaction with your ear canal, the tip you're using, will dictate a different timbre and a different tonality, will mean that it's going to be sounding different for sure. For many, it probably will sound the same, but will probably sound different. Anyway, moving on, because I don't want to bore you guys. Another final one here to compare is the mods that I did on the Blonde, okay, which I called them the if you guys remember, the Bloxygen. Okay, I did this mod on the Blonde 03, all right, and for the sake of comparison, I'm going to put it up with the Oxygen, the latest one. Look at that, huh? Doesn't that look exactly the same almost? Huh? It looks almost exactly the same. If anything, the Blonde probably has a more controlled mids, upper mids, and treble. Look at that, huh? Check that out. Does it sound the same? Guys, it doesn't sound the same. It sounds very close. Why? Because the driver is basically the same driver as well. The driver of the Blonde is basically the same thing. But it's not, you can pick up on the difference in the sound, okay? And then I still thought I could improve upon that, and I did improve upon it. And I made a newer version of that Bloxygen, that I call it. And the newer version of the Bloxygen is this graph that I'm going to be putting now in red. Okay, there we go. And that's my new latest Bloxygen. So just this increase here at the base is not even noticeable. What I did do is clean up the mids, upper mids, and treble, and it just sounds amazing. Why? Because the original Bloxygen compared to the Oxygen, the treble was a little bit too clinical, too energetic. Although, and I will show it to you again. Although it doesn't seem like it. You see, it doesn't seem like it, but it was. So I cleaned it up, and this latest version of the Bloxygen sounds tremendous. Out of a $25 IEM, I mean, the Oxygen driver is a cheap driver. It's not an expensive driver. For those of you that think it's an expensive driver, it is not an expensive driver. Okay, it's a driver that costs $4 at most. Okay, depending on the quantity, probably the price will even go down. But it costs about $4. It was being sold on AliExpress a couple of months ago for as much as $40 a piece. $40 a piece. Okay, so that does Tanstrom have a nice profit margin there? Of course they do, but it's not only them, it's every single brand. I mean, the driver, let's be honest, let's be very honest here. The driver, for example, on the, where is it now? Oh my, when you get so many things here, you want to find it. It's not easy. I believe it's this. Yes, let's be honest here. The driver on, for example, the SimGod, the EW200, it's a fantastic driver. It's a very good driver. Quality-wise, I think it's probably even better than the driver of the Oxygen, unquestionably. Sound-wise, it's very competent. It sounds really, really good. I can't really fault it. But it's an IM that costs $40. So how expensive can that driver actually be? Okay, how expensive will it actually be? And then you still got the shells, which are very high quality. So there's not a lot of profit margin there. I mean, it's not like the EW200 costs $5. No. So, the higher the price tag becomes, the larger that profit margin becomes, because basically the price of the materials is very much the same throughout, the majority of the times. I mean, with very few exceptions, you're not going to find a dramatically different driver on a, on a The Audio top of the line IM, or a Yanyan top of the line IM, or something costing $1,000 or more than what you're going to find in a cheaper. I mean, I'll give you another example. An VX uses Sonyan BAs, okay? The same BAs that you find, for example, in the Audio Neon Pro. One costs $2,300, the other one costs was initially $500, and the price has gone up. It's now like $850 or something. It's the same drivers, people. It's the same drivers. And you listen to one and you listen to the other, and the Neon sounds pretty impressive. I would even dare say that for me personally, at least, I like more the Neon than I do the Anoli VX. Obviously, the Anoli VX guys will now be taking out their pitchforks and wanting to kill me, And that's the thing. The Oxygen, I like it. I've always liked the Oxygen. It was my first, let's say, more expensive IM. So maybe I've got this bias towards it. But I even admitted to it now recently. The SIMGOT, the EA 1000 format, is a better IM. It's cheaper, So Oxygen compared to the Olina and the Olina SE, okay. So it's got the same driver. Let's not even say it's different series. It's got the same driver. It doesn't sound exactly the same. It doesn't. To my ears, it doesn't. I'm sorry. And I'm sure to many other people that actually had the opportunity of comparing them, they also came to the same conclusion. It doesn't sound exactly the same. Okay? Does that mean it's a bad thing or a good thing? No, obviously it's a good thing, because we were able to get a product which was giving us 95%, maybe even 100% to some of you, of the performance of a tantrum Oxygen for a third of the price. I mean, $100 and the original one is even cheaper compared to $280. I mean, fantastic. Where can you go wrong? The same thing happens now with the A500. For $70, you're getting an IM, like I've mentioned, that is comparable to an Oxygen. It's comparable to an Oxygen, on the same level, $70, Anyway, guys, I hope I didn't bore you too much with this, and I hope I was able to as well clarify and take away some of the doubts and answer some of the questions that people were making and doing to me. And that's it. I mean, I really, if you have any more questions, or if you would like me to do further videos along the lines of what I just done, please let me know. And if obviously I do have the IMs, it will be an absolute pleasure. Okay. Anyway, you take care now. Bye bye.